boys and girls. Welcome to the Clifton Park Afternoon Library. It is the end of a long journey. We are going to make pizza with the ingredients from the garden that we grew all summer long. It was a great summer. It was hot. We had a lot of rain. We got a lot of tomatoes in my garden. And you've probably seen those pictures on social media already, so you know we had tomatoes, we had red cherry peppers, a ton of basil, lots of oregano, the chives, but they're there. And so we are going to put together a pizza for ourselves today. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'm working in the library, so I have to tell you, I don't have an oven here. So what we're going to do is make a fresh pizza sauce. And can I tell you, it is so tasty. It's like you're eating liquid tomatoes right off the vine. They are delicious. And the basil, people are coming in saying, ooh, can we have some after you're done? So this is what we're gonna do. The first thing that you have to remember is when you get your ingredients from the garden, like all the tomatoes, okay, and this is the oregano, and these are basil leaves, and I showed you the peppers already. What you have to do is wash them, okay? Even though you didn't do anything but water them with water from the hose, dirt and other things so it's very important that you wash and dry all your ingredients from the garden before you use them. Now, one of the things I like to do is have all my ingredients in place, which is not only can you see what we're putting in it, but it also makes sense because when I'm ready to add ingredients, I just have to grab a bowl of what's in it. This is what's called mise en place, which means everything in one place. And cooks and chefs and everyone in restaurants tend to use it. If you watch a lot of cooking shows, maybe like MasterChef Junior, you'll see a lot of mise en place going on. Everything prepped, everything ready, and then you just go, be great. Now, I have a word of interest to families. If this whole project has been a family project, from planting seeds to transferring them to the garden, to picking them and eating them, of course, and now it's time to make the family pizza, and you have little kids, you know your children's abilities much better than I do, but if you want everybody to be a part of it, I have some suggestions for you. Number one, these are the chives. Now, chives are going to go on last, but after they've been picked, there's no reason with a pair of good safety scissors, your children can't just cut chives. And that will help them add an ingredient to it. You can also do that with the basil leaves. They can either cut them into skinny strips, or you can, which is one of my favorite ways to do it. Again, from watching cooking shows, this is how we know what to do. You put your basil leaves together, and then if they want to, this is great small motor coordination and practice. You roll the basil leaves up. Now, if you were an adult, you would cut them with a knife on a flat. You can cut them and still get those nice long twirly strips of basil that we're going to be using later in the pizza. Now, there are a couple of ways to deal with a tomato. What I have found is if you ended up growing the plum tomatoes that I have planted, plum tomatoes have a very thick skin, and you can actually do one of two things. One is you can, with a knife, cross an X in the bottom of the tomato and start to peel it. The other possibility, and if you think your kids can handle that, as long as you do the X and the cutting of the original, then they can just peel And once they're done peeling, they can hand it off to you or to an older sibling who is allowed to use a sharp knife. Cut out the core of the tomato, et voila! You are ready to put it into the food processor. Now the other possibility is, because they do have such thick skins, is you can peel them with a peeler. But it's not just any peeler, it wants to be a vegetable peeler that has serrated teeth in the middle as opposed to just a straight blade, because that serrated edge grabs the skin but not much more, and it only takes off a little bit, so we're not taking off too much of the meaty part of the tomato. And again, take out the core, and it's ready to go into the food processor or the blender. Okay. One last thing to say, which is, we talked about in one of the earlier videos the idea that some plants or kinds of vegetables were difficult to get and that you could substitute them. Well, I told you that the plum tomatoes have a really thick skin. Other tomatoes that you may plant and want to use in sauce, you can use them, but you have to peel them a different way. It's kind of time consuming. You have to boil water. You put that X in, just like I told you before, okay? And then when the water comes to a boil, you pop your tomatoes in, you let them boil, they come back to a boil, and boil for 60 seconds, and then a grown-up takes that big pot of water, empties it out, and puts the tomatoes in what's called an ice bath. And that shocks them, and the longer they sit in it, the skin starts to peel off or get a little wrinkly. Your fingers in the bathtub so you can kind of pick at them, and you just yank the skin off. So I hope you can use plum tomatoes, and if you can't do that, you can also use peeled whole from a can, but the flavor is completely different. Okay, we are set. I'm going to put the remainder of my tomatoes into my food processor. You could use a blender. Just so you know, to get 2 cups of tomato sauce, you want to use probably about 8 to 10 tomatoes, depending on the size. Just to see what the difference was, and so I knew how much to make, I showed you that you could use peeled tomatoes. There were 13 tomatoes in that can. But you know something? Half of them were as small as my smallest one, so it was probably more like 8, which is why that's what I said, approximately. Now the other thing that I like to do, and I'm going to tell you right now, that I like to get the seeds out of my sauce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to puree my sauce. You do that for about 30 seconds to a minute. Now the recipe actually calls for you to put all the ingredients in. However, I have found that I like my sauce without seeds. And so, handy dandy strainer, you pour your pureed tomatoes in there. Now, put the food processor back, the bowl on the motor. I am going to put my tomato sauce. My hands are clean. That's another thing you should wash before you start. So you put your tomato sauce back in the food processor or blender. Remember I talked about mise en place? Here we go. One thing you must remember is if you use canned tomatoes, they put salt in them. So you're going to use a lot less salt to taste in a pizza sauce made with canned tomatoes than you would in a fresh tomato sauce. I have my salt. And that's a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half. It's always better, it's easier to add salt than it is to try to take away that salty flavor. So let's start with a teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of pepper. And then we are going to put the lid back on and make sure it's locked. Ready? 30 more seconds. And this is what your sauce will look like when it comes out of the food processor. Time to put the pizza together. Now again, because I'm in the library and we don't have an oven, I couldn't bake a crust and I won't be able to, and we don't want it to get soggy before I can get it home. So what I did was I bought a pre-baked crust. They're fairly stiff, they're aerated, so they're gonna stand up to this. Now, we're going to take that delicious sauce and we are going to spoon. This is another place where your smaller kids can help. Now you don't want to make it so that you can't see the crust through the tomato sauce. If you do, that means you've got a little too much sauce on there. But you want it, especially with a pre-baked crust. I think you do want it a little heavier because you want it to soak in just a little bit. Another thing the kids can help with, depending on how chunky you want your cheese, they could take some cheese, and again, they could either do one of two things. Break it off and make a pile and then put it on when you say, okay, ready for the cheese. Or you can grate it or cut it into very thin slices and let them help put it on. Or, and finally, one that I think we all know very, very well, is why we have the grater here, and this size hole is probably the best. You can take a handful and then just sprinkle it. Now the idea here is that because it's fresh, you really do want the pizza sauce to shine. So I love cheese, but I gotta tell you, I love this pizza sauce even better. So enough, but not too much. Okay, what else do we need? We put oregano in our sauce. We did not put basil in, but we did cut it. This is a really cool thing. And I find that fresh basil on the top of a pizza as opposed to in a pizza sauce just adds more, it tastes like super pizza. It's amazing, and your taste buds, and you will love it. And see, look at the ribbons that we cut when we rolled up those leaves. And now they're all over the pizza. And you can play with this until you think you've got enough. I will tell you, the first couple of times I did this, I thought I had enough, and I found myself wanting more after it came out of the oven and I tried it. So, where we're concerned about making sure that we don't have too much salt, I would say maybe there's no such thing as too much basil. And if you have a lot of basil in your garden the same way I do, we'll be making pesto later. So, this is really a classic, what they call a pizza margherita. Sauce, cheese, and basil. And it's ready to go into the oven. Oh, wait a minute. We have people who like spicy things. Oh, the red peppers. Now, Nice thing about a hot red cherry pepper is you can control some of the heat that they give off. When you clean them, you take out the center and you take out all the seeds, because the seeds are where the heat is. And so I have no seeds in my hot cherry peppers. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few on, because not everybody in my family likes hot cherry peppers. And they're thinner slices, and I think I'll do about 1/3 of the pizza. But wait, what about those onions? Well, remember I said onions were kind of hard to grow? That's where our chives come in. And so what we're going to do with our very clean scissors, we're just going to cut and put some chives all over the pizza. And one last thing, because it's a different flavor, we are going to use, I'm really fond of shaved Parmesan. So instead of powder or little, I like the stuff that looks just like very skinny, broken pieces of cheese. And so we're just going to scatter a little, because again, cheese is a wonderful thing, but you don't want to really hide the fresh tomato flavor of this amazing pizza. And there you have it. I am going to go and see if I can put this, well, I have to take it home, and then I will show you pictures of that when it's done. I will also show you pictures of a pizza that I made with a fresh crust. And I just want to show you. And here is the color and the sauce that I made with canned plum tomatoes, with all the same seasonings that we put into the fresh sauce that we just made. It's kind of cool. It looks like sauce that you have seen before and you've tasted and you're probably pretty happy with. This. See how red it is? And the difference? And it's actually got a different sort of density to it. And this, I guarantee you, once you make a fresh sauce, you will never go back during the summer when you have fresh tomatoes to making a canned sauce. And honestly, if I hadn't been talking and just cooking, I think it might have taken me about maybe 15 minutes. Perfect speedy dinner. So this is what I made, and I'm going to cook it, and I'll put a picture in at the end of this video so that you can see what that looked like. But I would love to see what your pizzas look like that you made with the vegetables and the herbs from your garden. Send me a picture, bring me a picture. I'm at the library. You know where it is. Come see me, and good luck and good eating.